The voice came from the kitchen, not loud at first, almost conversational, but there was something in it, a sharpness I hadn't heard before, that made me stop walking and set down the grocery bag I was still holding. "Mom, those groceries are for the dinner party." I looked at the bag of oranges in my hand. I had picked them out myself 20 minutes ago at the Kroger on Maple Street. I remembered choosing them carefully, pressing each one, checking for soft spots. I am 67 years old and I have been buying oranges since before my daughter-in-law was born. "I know," I said. "I bought them." She was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the hallway, arms crossed. She had that look she sometimes got, not quite anger, something more controlled than anger, patience maybe, running out. "Kyle's parents are coming on Saturday," she said. "Everything in that fridge is for Saturday. I've been planning this for 3 weeks." I put the oranges on the counter. "I bought those to eat," I said. "Not for Saturday." She looked at the oranges, then at me. "The fridge is organized," she said. "I'd really appreciate it if you could just ask before you add things." Before I add things to the refrigerator." I didn't say anything else. I picked up the oranges, put them back in the bag, and walked upstairs to my room, which was what used to be the guest room, which I had been sleeping in for 4 months. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the window. The maple tree in the front yard was just starting to turn. It was late September, still warm, and the leaves were barely orange at the tips, like they weren't sure yet whether to change. I thought about my house in Columbus, the kitchen with the yellow curtains, the way the afternoon light came through the back window and fell across the table at exactly 4 o'clock every day, like it had an appointment. I had lived there for 31 years. I had raised my son in that house. I thought about how I had sold it 8 months ago because my son Kyle had said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone. Mom, we have the space. Mom, it makes no sense for you to be rattling around in that big house by yourself when we have a whole extra room and Adrian and I would love to have you." I had believed him. That was my first mistake. Not because Kyle was lying. I don't think he was lying. I think he meant it in that moment, the way people mean things when the meaning hasn't been tested yet. "My name is Lorraine. I retired 4 years ago after 32 years as a high school librarian in Columbus, Ohio. My husband Gerald died of a heart attack 6 years ago, very suddenly, on a Tuesday afternoon in March. He was mowing the lawn. He was 63. We had been planning to take a trip to Portugal. We never went. After Gerald died, I managed fine. I want to be clear about that because the story I'm about to tell might make it sound like I was some fragile old woman who couldn't take care of herself, and that is not what happened. I cooked my own meals. I drove myself to appointments. I had friends, a book club, a garden that I was genuinely proud of. I was lonely sometimes. That's different from not managing. But Kyle worried. He had always been a worrier, even as a child. And when he called to suggest I move in with them, I could hear in his voice that he had already decided this was the right thing, that he had built the whole idea into a structure in his mind, and my agreeing was just the last piece. I agreed. I sold my house in Columbus for $187,000. The market wasn't great, but I wasn't in a hurry and I thought the number was fair. I put $150,000 into my savings account and kept the rest liquid for whatever I might need. I had my Social Security, which came to about $1,840 a month, and a small pension from the school district. I wasn't wealthy, but I was not a burden. I want that on the record too. I moved into Kyle and Adrian's house in Dearborn, Michigan on a Wednesday in February. It was cold and the roads were icy and Kyle's back was bothering him, so mostly I moved myself, which is fine. I'm good at moving. I've done it before. The room was nice. Adrian had put fresh towels out, and there was a little lamp on the nightstand. I remember thinking it was a good sign. The first few weeks were fine. We had dinner together most nights. I helped put the dishes. I stayed out of their way in the mornings because I knew they had their routines, their coffee, their habits, the particular rhythms of a household that doesn't belong to you. But then things shifted. Gradually, the way things always shift, Not in one big moment, but in 100 small ones that you don't notice until you're already standing somewhere you didn't intend to be. Adrian started leaving notes, not unfriendly at first, just informational. FYI, using the guest bathroom for storage temporarily. Could you use the whole bath? Or, heads up, I'm meal prepping Sunday mornings. Kitchen might be busy 9-12. Then, if you could keep the TV volume lower after 9. Kyle has early calls. Then, please don't use the good towels. Those are for guests. The towels she had put out for me when I moved in. I started eating lunch in my room, not because anyone told me to, just because the kitchen had started to feel like somewhere I wasn't entirely welcome, and eating in my room was easier than feeling that feeling 3 times a day. My son didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't say anything. That was harder than the notes. Kyle and I had always been close, or I had thought we were. He called me every Sunday when he lived in Michigan, and I was still in Columbus. He drove down for every holiday. But living in the same house, I was discovering, was different from visiting. And Kyle, in his own home, was a different person than Kyle on the phone. Quieter. More careful. More Adrian's. I don't blame her entirely. I've thought about this a great deal. A mother-in-law in your house is not easy. I understand that. What I don't understand, what I will never understand, is the refrigerator. It was a Tuesday in October when I found the note. I'm not talking about the oranges conversation. That was in September. After the oranges, I was more careful. I bought a small cooler and kept it in my room, stocked with things that were clearly, unambiguously mine. Yogurt, a block of cheese, some apples, things I didn't have to ask permission to eat. But the note I'm talking about appeared on a Tuesday morning on the refrigerator door, secured with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. It said, "The items on the top 2 shelves and in the left crisper are for family meals. Please do not remove or use these items without checking first." Below it in smaller letters she had written, "Your items are on the bottom shelf and in the door." I stood in the kitchen in my slippers and I read that note 3 times. Then I took a photo of it with my phone. I don't know exactly why I did that. Some instinct, maybe. Some part of me that had been a librarian for 32 years and understood that documentation matters. That the difference between something that happened and something that can be proven is paper, or in this case, a JPEG. I went back to my room and I sat in the chair by the window and I thought about Gerald. He would have known what to do. Gerald was the kind of man who always knew what to do, not because he was aggressive, but because he was clear. He had a way of understanding exactly where the line was and saying so, calmly, without apology. I had always relied on that. I hadn't realized how much until he wasn't there. But Gerald was gone, and I was 67. And I was sitting in a room in my son's house in Dearborn, Michigan, and I had just been assigned a shelf. I called my friend Claudette that afternoon. She lives in Columbus still, 3 blocks from the house I sold. She is 71 and she says exactly what she thinks, which is one of the reasons I have kept her as a friend for 40 years. "Lorraine," she said when I told her about the note, "how much money do you have in savings?" What does that have to do with anything? Because if you have enough to get out, you need to get out. I can't just leave. Why not? I didn't have an answer for that. But I didn't leave, not yet. Because leaving felt like giving up, and I have never been good at giving up, which is a character trait that has served me well in most areas of my life and very badly in this one. What I did instead was start paying attention. I noticed that my Social Security was being deposited into a joint account that Kyle and I had opened together when I moved in. His suggestion, he said it would make it easier for him to help me with bills. I had not thought much about this at the time. I thought about it now. I pulled up the account on my laptop and looked at the transaction history going back 4 months. My deposits were there, $1,840 every 3rd Wednesday, regular as rain. The withdrawals were also there, small amounts at first, $200 in March, $150 in April. Kyle had mentioned once that he was helping cover a grocery bill, that it was easier to just take it from the joint account. I had said okay. I had not asked again. I had not thought to check, but the amounts had grown. By August, it was $600 a month. By September, $800 an hours. The money was moving into an account I didn't recognize, one that wasn't mine. I added it up. Over 4 months, $2,340 had left my account without my explicit knowledge or agreement. I sat very still for a long time. Then I called Claudette again. "You need a lawyer," she said. "Kyle wouldn't, Lorraine." "I know," I said. "You know," she agreed. "I found an elder law attorney named Mr. Hargrove through a referral from my doctor's office. His practice was in Ann Arbor, about 40 minutes from Dearborn. I made the appointment myself, drove there myself, on a Thursday morning when Kyle was at work and Adrian was at her sister's. He was a careful man, deliberate in the way he spoke, with reading glasses he kept taking on and off. He listened to everything without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a moment. "Do you have documentation?" he asked. I handed him my phone. The photo of the note on the refrigerator. Screenshots of the account transactions. A running log I had been keeping in a small notebook since October. Dates, amounts, specific incidents. The oranges, the towels, the volume on the television. He looked through everything slowly. "Mrs. Lorraine," he said. I had given him my full name. "What you're describing with the account is potentially actionable. Unauthorized use of a joint account to redirect funds can constitute financial exploitation of an elder under Michigan law. It's a civil matter at minimum, and depending on intent, could be criminal." Criminal. I had not let myself think that word. "What do I do?" I asked. "First," he said, "you remove yourself from that joint account and open a new one in your name only. Today, if possible. You have every right to do this. The funds are yours. And then?" "Then we send a letter." I opened a new account at a different bank that same afternoon. I transferred my pension deposit instructions and set up my Social Security to redirect to the new account starting the following month. The teller was a young woman who didn't ask questions, which I appreciated. On a Friday morning, 3 weeks later, Kyle received a letter from Mr. Hargrove's office. I was not in the house when he read it. I was at Claudette's, having driven to Columbus the day before with 2 suitcases and my laptop, and the box of photographs I had moved with me from the old house and was not willing to leave behind. Claudette had made up her guest room and there was coffee already brewed when I arrived, and I sat at her kitchen table and cried for about 10 minutes. And then I stopped crying and we talked about other things for the rest of the evening, which is what good friends do. Kyle called me 6 times that Friday. I let it go to voicemail. His text started out confused. "Mom, what is this?" Then hurt. "Mom, I don't understand why you did this." Then, by the afternoon, something I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize how much had come out of your account. I should have been keeping track. I should have talked to you." I read that text sitting in Claudette's kitchen with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. I believed him. That's the strange part. I believe he genuinely hadn't been tracking it, that it had started as something small and practical, and had grown without either of them really examining it. I don't think my son set out to take my money. I think he got comfortable. I think Adrian got comfortable. I think they stopped seeing me as a person with finances of my own and started seeing me as a household resource, and that is a kind of carelessness that I cannot live inside of, regardless of the intention behind it. I texted back, "I know, we'll talk, but I'm not coming back to the house." The letter from Mr. Hargrove requested repayment of the $2,340, plus an additional $1,200 for legal costs and damages. Kyle and Adrian paid within 3 weeks by check without a counteroffer. I think the word actionable had clarified some things for them. The money wasn't the point, though it was useful. The point was the moment I signed the paperwork at Mr. Hargrove's office, when he slid the settlement across the desk and I picked up the pen, and I felt, for the first time in almost a year, like I was making a decision that was entirely my own. No one had suggested it. No one had arranged it. No one was going to check whether I'd done it correctly. Just me. My signature. My choice. I am not a dramatic person. I didn't cry. I just noticed the feeling the way you notice sunlight when you walk outside after being in a dim room for a long time. Oh, there it is. That's what that feels like. I found my apartment in Columbus in December. 1 bedroom, second floor, a building about a mile from Claudette's house. The rent was $1,150 a month, which fit inside my income with a little leftover. The kitchen had a window that faced east. On the first morning I made coffee and stood at that window and watched the light come up, and I felt something I had almost forgotten I was capable of feeling. Quiet. Good quiet. The kind that comes from being somewhere that is yours. I bought a small plant at the grocery store. A pothos, the kind that grows no matter what you do to it. I set it on the windowsill. It's still there. It's much bigger now. I talk to Kyle occasionally. Thanksgiving was careful, short. We are figuring out what we are to each other now, which is not the same as what we were before, and probably shouldn't be. That is a grief I carry, but I carry it with my eyes open. I knew what I was doing when I left. I chose clarity over comfort, which is sometimes the only choice that doesn't cost you more later. What I know now, that I wish I had known before, never put your money somewhere someone else can reach it without your explicit written understanding of exactly how it will be used. I don't care if it's your child. I don't care if they mean well. Money has a way of becoming very clear about who people are, and you need to be the one in the room when that clarity arrives, not the one who finds out later by reading a transaction history alone at a laptop in a bedroom that was never really yours. Read everything, sign nothing in a hurry. And if someone makes you feel like a guest in your own life, if they assign you a shelf, put your things in the door, write your name on the bottom, pay attention to that feeling. It is telling you something true. I'm 67 years old. I live alone. I eat oranges whenever I want to. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened. Living alone does that to you, gives you time, more of it than you expect, and it sits with you quietly until you actually use it. What I keep coming back to is this: none of it happened all at once. That's the part people don't understand when I tell them the story. They expect a villain with a plan. What I had instead was a slow erosion. A note here, a shelf assignment there, $200 one month, $600 the next. Each thing, on its own, could be explained away. Together, they added up to something I almost didn't survive. Not physically, but in the way that matters more when you're 67 and widowed and you've already lost enough. I think about Kyle and I don't feel anger anymore. What I feel is something closer to grief, and something else underneath that I'd call clarity. He is not a bad person. He is a person who got comfortable. And comfort, I've learned, is one of the most dangerous things that can happen between people who love each other, because it makes you stop looking, you stop checking, you stop asking whether the person across the table still has what they need, whether they're okay, whether they feel like a person or like furniture. Adrian got comfortable too. I think the refrigerator note, that sunflower magnet, that careful handwriting, I think she genuinely believed she was being organized. Reasonable, even. That's the thing about people who cause harm without malice. They are often very convinced of their own reasonableness. And they're not entirely wrong about themselves. That's what makes it complicated. But here's what I know about cause and effect, stripped of everything else. How you treat people accumulates. It doesn't disappear just because you didn't intend it. Every small dismissal, every note on the refrigerator, every time you hand someone a smaller portion of dignity than they deserve, it piles up somewhere. And eventually, the person on the receiving end either collapses under it or starts making phone calls. I made phone calls. That was the intelligence part, I think, not cleverness. I'm not talking about strategy. I mean the simple wisdom of knowing when a situation cannot be fixed by enduring it. I spent 4 months enduring. I bought a cooler for my room. I ate my apples in private. I told myself it would smooth out. It did not smooth out, because things like that never do. They only become the new flaw. The courage wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a confrontation scene. It was a Thursday morning appointment in Ann Arbor. It was driving there alone in the cold. It was sitting across from Mr. Hargrove and saying out loud the things I had only written in a notebook and not apologizing for saying them. that took more out of me than I expected, and it gave back more than I expected too. I want to say something to anyone who is sitting where I was sitting, not in my specific chair, in that feeling. The one where you've made yourself smaller and smaller trying to fit into a space that was never actually offered to you, where you've confused keeping the peace with being at peace. You are not too old to leave. You are not too old to call a lawyer, open a new bank account, drive 40 minutes to a city you don't know well, and tell the truth to a stranger with reading glasses. You are not too old to begin again in a one-bedroom apartment with east-facing windows and a pothos on the sill. Lorraine figured that out at 67. You can figure it out too, whatever age you are, whatever Thursday morning you're willing to finally keep the appointment.